Today's guest is sharing a story that is sadly becoming all too common for the cheated, coping for years while trying to understand the details of their partner's infidelity. It's very difficult to get the entire truth out of the cheater, isn't it? They typically only reveal the details of their affair that can be materially proven. They don't usually want to give you the full story, do they? No. No, no, no. It's much easier to give you the truth in small drips and not any more than they absolutely need to. After all, what do all cheaters have in common? They're liars. So why do we look to them for truth? Unfortunately, that's precisely what many of us do. If you're the victim of cheating, there's an excellent chance that you've tried to wrestle the truth out of your abuser. But don't blame yourself. The cheater is, after all, holding all the cards. They know the dates, the details, and all the dirt of their affair, and you're the last person they want to tell about it. As you'll soon learn from today's guest, it's often a maddening and gutting journey trying to unravel the web of your partner's affair. Allie, welcome to the show.
Hi.
Let's start at the beginning. Give us a brief history of your relationship, how long you've been together with your husband, David, and the health of that relationship in its early days and as it progressed.
Okay. Thank you for having me. So he and I met. We actually went to the same high school, but I didn't meet him until after I had gotten out. So we kind of grew up in the same area. Um, it was one of those situations where I was a couple years ahead of him in school, and we had some friends in common, but we didn't really hang out with the same groups, and we were on the outskirts of a fairly big city. Um, so I met him the summer after I graduated. He was going into his senior year, and yeah, we were one grade apart. And so we dated pretty much solidly after we started. We weren't completely serious right at first, but after a while, I'd say that after about a 6 month period, we became exclusive for whatever that meant in the 80s. We didn't have cell phones and social media to catch people doing anything. So it was just kind of a typical 80s relationship at that time. And so I dated him all the way through. I went to college, got out. He went to college, and he and I got married right out of college. So we were in our early 20s. And right away, we both worked. And I'd say that my job was kind of different in that I didn't have like a 9 to 5. He did. And he was in a very male dominated type of uh, job, whereas I was more in, well, I don't want to give it away, but I was in a much easier job to manipulate my time away from my job. So his job became more and more as he got, more into it and stuff. He, I think that was when the first issues started with our relationship. Was he just kind of pulled away, didn't have as much time. And we waited 5 years to have kids because I knew with his job that he might want to go back to school and or go to law school or go to something that would involve more. And I didn't want to put the pressure on him to, be taking care of a family in addition to in a job that was pretty cutthroat. And so I'd say the first 5 years of our marriage, um, we dealt with that. Um, I know I felt a little bit like I was second to his job at times, and it just kind of because I had been kind of from a broken family. My mother had a really horrible divorce, very well known divorce, and it was awful. Like the me and my stepsister and stepbrother, we went through a lot. I watched my family kind of fall apart, and so in my mind, I wondered, is this how all marriages are, where it's just a matter of time before people pull away or find something else, or you know don't want to be together anymore. So I came from that initially, and then as time ticked by, it did seem that way, but I seemed to make a lot of excuses in my head that, he's just, trying to work and support us, and everybody wants to make a lot of money, all this kind of stuff. And I guess I kind of made excuses for that, and I allowed it. I mean, that's basically my biggest thing is I didn't step forward and go, "Hey, am I not as important as all these other things?" So that was, I think, one of my first mistakes. And also just kind of expecting my marriage to go down the road that marriages that I'd been exposed to had gone down. And I've since learned that's not a good idea either.
Do you
So,
think that because of your mother's or your parents' divorce that it sounds like that would play a significant role in terms of how you looked at marriages and the likelihood that they're going to work out?
yeah, very much so. But I didn't know that then. I did not have a clue about that then. Um, I I know, now, after talking to therapists and just even before I found out what I did in the last couple of months, I know that it not only affected how I expected to be treated, but it also affected how I treated my own children, because I think I was raised by a narcissist, very much so. And so I had, oh my gosh, personalities are already kind of, nobody's the same and nobody's going to expect the same. But I think if you're raised by someone whose needs are more important than anyone else's, you learn how to be this subservient, person who's programmed to allow people to treat you a certain way. And I know I was. It doesn't have anything to do with love either. I do believe my mother loved me as much as she was capable of, but she was handicapped by the way she felt about her own self and what she deserved and how much attention she could pay to other people. And so, yes, to answer your correct,
Okay.
you are correct. Yes.
Okay. All right. So moving forward through your relationship, how long had you been together before you started to feel like, I don't know, I'm not sure how to feel about this marriage?
Um, well, getting pregnant was not exactly planned, but it wasn't, like, for some reason, we hadn't really discussed any time plan for it, but it just sort of happened. And um, I was excited because, I had never really thought of myself as being a mother, but I had never really not thought of being a mom. But I think that when that happened, it sort of put us on a pause in a way, our relationship, his and mine. And we became all about the baby, and everything was about the baby. And that's another thing, number two, I believe, that led to, um, time just starts rolling, like you're rolling down a hill, like from the very top of the hill when you start having children. Things just start happening so fast, and you think you're going to have a lot more time to do this, and you think you're going to have more time when they're little. And the reality is, time really does fly when those things are occurring in your life, and you can forget super easily to pay attention to things that could be like a bleeding sore right in front of you because this other thing is occurring. And so, yes, we did get caught up in that, and we had another baby fairly soon. He was like a year and a half afterwards. So we had two children right away. Bought our first house, sold it, bought another house. So these things were occurring over the next 5 years for sure. And then I had some kind of other personal issues with my family. My one of my parents was diagnosed with a terminal illness during this period, and I became not only the caretaker of my children, but also this parent that really had a very limited amount of time left. And I was also continuing to try and work in my field, which was kind of difficult. But so I'd say that the first 5 years after we had our first baby, and then the second 5 years was a chunk of blur, I believe, of me taking care of a parent. I had gotten a really big promotion type offer that I ended up turning down, which I kick myself every day for because I could have really, I think, taken off. His job, he ended up changing fields, and he went from a very male dominated field to a field that is very much dominated by women. And so that all occurred during that period.
Okay. Take me through the first discovery of infidelity in the relationship.
Well, in the fall of it was the fall of 2004, and we'd been together, for a lot longer, but we'd been married for 16 years, I want to say. And I thought we were doing good. I felt like we had a pretty good life, I believe. And in the fall of that year, though, he would start just out of the blue. He would say, I'm not happy. And I would say, well, what are you not happy about? And he would just say, I'm just not happy. I feel like um, our sex life isn't where it should be. I feel like you don't pay enough attention to me. I feel like you are, um, I'm not important, I guess, is the big gist of it. But he would just reduce it down to, I'm not happy. And, I would try and get out of him, what exactly would make you happy? You can't just tell someone I'm unhappy and then expect them to guess at what it is that you're not unhappy about. The communication needs to be better there. And I guess because of my experience with my own parents, I was always terrified that he was going to be unhappy enough to leave me, and I needed to figure out what it was. And, I couldn't get it out of him exactly what it was because it was other things too. It wasn't just sex, it wasn't just time. He would get really angry with me for such dumb stuff, like the garage door broke one day and he flew off the handle, and it just didn't seem like him. He didn't seem like he was the same person that I had married and been with, and we'd had great fun at Disney World the year before. He just seemed really uptight. And that was probably in like October that I believe that occurred, that incident with the garage door. And then the next time I realized that something weird was going on was I had been out with my kids, and he called me to see where we were, and I told him, and he said, "Oh, we owned our own house at this time. We lived in a house." And he goes, "Would you grab one of those apartment magazines that they had at the grocery store back then before the internet was, I mean, there was internet, but the grocery store had these like free
The
card
apartment guide.
things, apartment guides, right?" And he goes, "Would you grab me one of those?" And I go, "No." And he goes, "Well, why not?" And I go, "If you want an apartment guide, you can get in your car and go get it yourself." And I hung up and I went home and I was like, "What in the world were you talking about?" And he goes, "Well, I've just been thinking about getting an apartment." "Why in the world would you do that? Like, you've got a house. We live in a house. You don't need an apartment." And the conversation just dropped. It was really strange. It was right around Thanksgiving when he did that. And I pushed him for it and I was like, "What is going on? Why are you saying this?" He was like, "I'm just unhappy." And I said, "So you think adding a rent to a mortgage is going to make you happier? That does not make any sense." He clammed up. And so I started asking him then, "If you're unhappy and you can't put into words why, can we go to a therapist? Can we see a counselor?" can we go figure something out? Because I don't want to go down the road my parents went down. And he said, no, I will not go to a therapist. I'm not going to tell anybody my problems. It's going to be pointless. And if we can't figure it out, then we just don't need to be together anymore. And I just, I don't know why, but I allowed it. And so the next couple months went by, and around, it was the last Saturday of the month, I had gone and taken my kids to wherever they were going. He and I used to tag team on Saturday mornings because one kid was involved in this activity, one kid was involved in that activity. But this particular day, when he woke up that morning, he said, I'm not going to be able to take child number 2 to practice. You're going to have to figure it out. And he left. It was on a Saturday morning. So I got up and took child number 1, took child number 2, came back to the house, jumped in the shower because we had a whole day of other stuff after I picked up child number 1 and child number 2. And I was sitting on, I was sitting on the bed after I took the shower in my bathrobe, and I hear the door. I heard the door open. So it was probably noon because I had been at the activities. And he comes in, and I realize he's dressed really nice. He's like not Saturday dressed, not going to, Walmart dressed, but dressed almost like he'd been at like a meeting or something. And he comes in and he sits on the bed and he goes, I just want to tell you, I put the deposit down for an apartment. And I I was like, "What? Why? And why would you do this?" Like he hadn't even said anything really to me in January, and he said, "Yeah, I'm just unhappy. I'm really unhappy. I've been telling you I'm unhappy. I'm unhappy. I'm unhappy. I'm unhappy." And I sat there looking at him, and I realized the more I said, the less he was going to tell me. So I physically made myself stop talking and tried to get him to say more because it seemed like that kind of worked. And then he gave me this spiel about how he wanted to be happy. He thought he'd be a better father and all this other stuff if he was happier. And then finally, after he was finished with that, I looked at him and I said, "Tell me the truth." And the look on his face went completely blank. He went from this convicted, I'm just telling her I'm happy. It was like I had poked a hole in something and it was deflated him. And I said, "Tell me the truth." And he goes, what? That is the truth." And I go, "No, tell me the truth. Tell me exactly what it is you're doing." And his face kind of changed. He looked away, he looked down, and he goes, "Well, I've met someone." And I, I just, it was everything in my body to keep myself from laughing out loud because that's how I usually react to like dramatic things is I laugh because it's just like a built up feeling. And I go, "You what?" And he said, "I met someone and we're going to try and make it work." That's what he said. And I couldn't believe it. And he got up and he walked over to like somewhere in the room. I think it was like in our bathroom or something. And I realized he had a duffel bag and it was half filled, but he was continuing to put stuff in it while we were talking. And I looked at him and I said some things that I can't repeat, but I just basically said, "Don't take anything from my house and get thee out." And
Yeah.
um, he starts to walk back in to the room. And I said, "No, I'm serious. Don't take anything from this house and get out." And it didn't dawn on me to ask much then at that time about who this other person was or anything along those lines. I just had this sort of fight or flight feeling that I needed to get him out of my house. And then I started thinking about, oh my God, I'm going to have to drive to go pick up child number 1 and child number 2. And I felt like I was about to explode. And so he walked out of the front door and I got dressed and I walked out the front door behind him, and I walked across the street to my neighbor's house, who was a good friend at the time. And I just wanted to be with someone. I don't know why. I couldn't be alone at that moment. And I looked out the window of her house and I watched him drive away in his truck. And it was, I, I, I can't even describe the feelings that I had at that time. Um, but it was probably the most pain. And it was also like a nightmare coming true, because of what I had been exposed to in my own, and when I was almost exactly the same age that child number one was at that moment. And so all of this was just completely sinking in, and I don't really know how I got my composure about me that day, but I do remember him driving off, and then probably about an hour later he called, and he said he wanted to come back and he wanted to talk to me more. I told him not to. He he said, "Please, I just really feel like I've made a mistake and I really just feel bad and I want to come back and talk to you and I want to see you in person." And I was like, "Don't come back. I don't want to see you. I don't want to hear anything. I That's how I handled it. I just like put these ears on and these blinders on, and I just said, "I can't. It hurts too much right now. I can't. I can't see you. I can't hear anything. I can't." And I do know that I arranged for someone else to go pick up the kids, because I was in no shape to drive. I was in no shape to go anywhere. And I believe I want to say it was like an hour or two after he left that he came back, and I physically couldn't have stopped him to come in, the house, even though I wanted to. I was really, by this time I was ill. I was physically ill. And, um, yeah, that was the first time. So it was ugly. It was really ugly.
Okay, so just to kind of recap, this is 16 years into your just the
Yes.
marriage or just the entire relationship?
Marriage. About
Okay.
21 of the relationship.
Okay. So you have two kids, and how old are your kids during this time?
They were about to turn 11 and 13.
Oh, okay. So
Wait, no,
when
no, no, I take that
he's
back. This was 17 years in our relationship. That's right. So yes. So I had a 10 and a 12-year-old when this occurred. So yeah.
okay. So when he started to say, "I'm unhappy, I want to get an apartment, pick me up an apartment guide," and all that about the apartment, did he ask you for a divorce?
No,
Okay.
he never even mentioned it. He just said, "I'm happy."
And he refused to go to marriage counseling. He refused to talk to anybody. He didn't want to work it out. He just wanted to leave.
Yes.
Well, take us to the next chapter. So he comes back to the house. It sounds like.
He came back to the house, and um he tries to start telling me things about this other person. And I do remember asking him, "How did you meet her?" Because he used that term, "I met someone." And I'm one of those literal people. I don't know if other people are, but when sometimes in a very high energy area, if somebody uses a term that can be used in different things, your brain kind of goes, "Well, what do you mean? Like that's such a odd thing to say," or something. And I remember saying to him, "Well, I meet people every day, but that doesn't mean I'm going to go move out of my house." And I said, "Explain what you mean. And who is this other person that's making you want to get an apartment and you put a deposit down on an apartment?" Um, and he said, "It's someone I work with." And I just really I don't know why, but just the thought of this person made me feel even sicker, and I didn't want to know. I didn't want to know about her. I don't know why. I didn't want to know though. And I remember the one person I did tell, which was the friend across the street, because she was like, "What the heck is going on?" And she kept saying, "Let's find out who this person is and let's go, like da da da." And I was like, "No, no, no, we can't. We cannot do that." Don't even go there. I will regret ever telling you anything. Now I know when I look back on that occurring in the way it did is because I was so terrified to expose my children to what I had been exposed to in this ugly divorce that had occurred in my life when I was their age. There was so many ugly things and such drawn out and people accusing and it was an ugly, ugly divorce. And I I just didn't want to do that. And so I put these blinders on, and he immediately said that night that when he left, they had been together that morning. I was correct. They had gone, I think, and had a powwow, and she was going to go tell her husband that she also had two kids almost the identical same age as mine. She was going to go tell
Oh, so
him
she's married and she has kids too. So she's
exactly.
going to go tell her husband.
Right. They were going to do it at the exact same time. Then come meet up together in the afternoon after the the discussions. Okay? That's what had happened. And when David left me after I told him to get out and did what I said, and I wouldn't let him take anything out of the house because I didn't know what he was taking, because I knew he had the duffel bag and there's no telling what was in that duffel bag, and I just didn't want him to take anything. And when he went to go meet Lynn, which was her name, um, he was on his way over there, and he told me this later. And when we did see a therapist at the time, he said that he called her and he said, I can't do it. And he called the apartment complex and told him, I can't do it. And he just had this horrible sense of, what am I doing to my family? I don't know if it was seeing me, and me basically just being destroyed by what he was saying, and realizing that he hadn't even given me a full explanation until that moment. And had I not pushed him that day and said, no, tell me the real truth, he was just going to walk out the door and let me believe that he was just unhappy and going to go live in an apartment to fix his happiness. And it took me prodding to hear something I didn't really want to even hear. So he came back that day. I was really sick. I mean, I physically became ill, and he didn't want to leave me. And I really don't blame him. I think if you ever have any feelings for anybody, especially if you've been in a 20-year relationship with them and you see them physically ill from something you've done, you don't want to leave them. You don't want to put them through that. And I believe that he did feel enough good towards me still that he couldn't see me in that position as sick as I was, because I don't know if anybody else has experienced this or not, but feeling that type of betrayal, it is not just emotional. It is you have a physical reaction
Oh,
to
yeah.
it. And there's a lot of stuff that goes on in your body, that feeling of losing the feeling in your arms and your legs, and people pass out. I became ill. I was throwing up, and um he couldn't after he came back, he couldn't leave. So he stayed that day, and I was so sick I didn't really have any say in it. But the next morning when we woke up, I told him to get out.
So this is all the same day. This is the day
Yeah.
that he tells you
Yes.
he's going to go live in this apartment. He signed a lease or whatever.
Yeah.
And then he does leave, but then he comes back, and then
Mhm.
he realizes, oh, I don't think I'm ready to do this. I don't think I'm
Right.
ready to go leave my family.
Right.
So that's all just the first day.
That was in one single day.
And the next day you woke up and you said, you need to leave.
Right. When I got physically okay again, like I got that all out, and I told him he had to leave, and he he knew. There was no question. He was like, okay, and um he did leave, and um he immediately though agreed to find a counselor. In fact, he found the counselor, and He was like, I've made a huge mistake. I'm so sorry. I can't believe I did this. I'm so selfish. Like, I can't believe I did this to you and the kids. And, you know, all of this stuff just, it started, the things that he was supposed to have said to me when he was telling me that he was unhappy instead of telling me to get an apartment guide were coming out of his mouth for the first time. And I was so overwhelmed. I couldn't believe that it was one of those moments that you're like, is this my real life or is this a movie, a bad movie? Um, and what do I do? What do I do? And so he stayed gone. I never even asked where he was staying, but I believe he stayed at his parents' house or a hotel. And we started to see a counselor kind of within the next week or so, and that did not go well at all. She was very old-fashioned counselor and way out of what we should have been dealing with. And I didn't even really get a good feeling from her, but she was extremely, like, flat out mean and rude to him. And it just did not set, it was not a safe zone for either of us. Um, and we didn't know any better. We didn't know that means go find another counselor. That doesn't, and sometimes I think in some certain circumstances, you can go to somebody too soon. Like, there's got to be some things that you work out individually and with other people. And when you have two children involved in it, like, there's levels of things. And sometimes you're just not ready to go tell another person, a third party, what's going on. And I think that between the fact that she was not the right type of therapist for us and the fact that we really weren't in the right headspace to be doing this, and I still had this betrayal and all of these other things, and he had guilt that we just went too soon. And I think we only went 2 or 3 times, and we finally thought, okay, we can fix this ourselves. That was the third thing, or fourth. I don't even know what number I'm on. We should never have thought that. There were so many things I didn't understand about myself, like bringing my parents' divorce into our relationship. I should have done work with a therapist on my own. There were so many things that I didn't do that I should have done for myself at the time. And I was so angry at him um, for what he had done. And I'd get little bits and pieces out of him. And I do remember when the therapist brought up, who is this other person? And he told her, and she said, have you ended it with her? And he said, yes, she hates me. That was the words that he used. She hates me. And I said, well, why don't you, if that's the case, then and you're still working with her, I think you should find another job, or she should, or something. And he indicated during that first session that she was maddest at him because she had already gone and told her husband, and he basically backed out on her. And so he caused not just the ripple with me, but he caused the ripple with her and started this issue with her and her husband, because her husband now knew. And so he had two women angry at him. And so the therapist made some remark that I should be listening in on a phone conversation or have her on speakerphone while he talks to her. And that feeling made me feel like I wanted to just pass out. And I was like, I do not want to hear her voice. I don't want to know her. I don't want to know anything about her. He says it's over. I listen to him, and we need to work these out. And obviously that was a huge mistake.
Did your children at the time understand anything that was going on?
My daughter slightly did, um, but my son did not. And his concern was, gosh, it was so sad. I remember him asking me, did daddy kiss another mommy on the lips? And I couldn't I couldn't even, like, hearing him say it in those terms, a daddy and a mommy, it threw me into this chain of thinking of her kids too. That her kids, there was 4 kids that were affected by their stupidity and their inability to come to terms with their quote unhappiness and entangling into, it's not unusual to find other people attractive. That's what happens in life. And I've listened to a book called Not Just Friends, and it talks about the way you can handle if you're attracted to someone else at a work or in an organization or in a social event. And one of the rules of thumb is, if the conversation you're having cannot be had in front of your spouse or your significant other, then you've crossed a line, and
Yes.
you've gone over it. And when my son said that to me, it was like someone reached into my heart and pulled it out. And all I could tell him was, you need to talk to your daddy about that. I can't I can't tell you what your daddy did and what he didn't do. But I knew the pain was already there in his little head, and I couldn't fix it for him, and it was horrible. My daughter, she was already at the age where she knew that boys and girls hurt each other, and she was kind of like, yeah, I'm not surprised. He's kind of an asshole, that kind of thing.
So you didn't sit down and talk to them or tell them what happened or anything like that? You kinda tried to shield them. Oh, I see.
No, I made him do it,
And he did?
and he did.
So, is the only, instance of infidelity and you lived happily ever after, right?
No.
Ta take me to the next chapter, Allie.
Okay, so um, after our kids grew up and went to high school and college and everything like that, in 2014, um, he started kind of the same thing. I'm unhappy, I'm unhappy. But this time around, I was like, no, you're not going to get away with that. You're going to have to tell me what you're unhappy about. And before I knew it, he had declared that he just didn't love me anymore. And we'd grown apart, and he felt like he damaged us to the point where we could never be fixed. He admitted that he did it by having the affair, and he just kept pointing to things that I had done, that I wasn't, quote, the best person for him and stuff. And I was so tired, to be honest with you. I was so exhausted, that I just said, okay, like, there wasn't going to be any tears this time. I'm not going to beg someone to love me. I don't want to be with someone if they don't want to be with me. I never imagined that um, we'd get to that point. But then again, I was still living under this impression that people just hurt each other in marriages and in relationships, because that's just the next level. Um, and so he moved out, and we were separated, officially separated, for a couple months. And then I remember asking him, and we were on good terms. Like, there was no tears or anything, like no hatred. And um, I told him after he moved out, and we'd been separated for a couple months, and he said he was going to file for divorce. And I, fine, that's fine. We were going to be amicable about it. I told him, I said, we never did deal with what you did. We never, we never even examined it. I never even found out anything about her. I didn't know if she continued to work with you. I didn't know what happened with her. Nothing. And he said, yeah, you're right. We didn't. And so I said, I think you can go to a therapist sometimes just to learn how to be, moving on to the next level. We still had adult kids, but I just said, let's just go see if we can find another therapist to help us. And he agreed. He said, yeah, I think that's a good idea. That way we both know what we've done wrong in the past. And we were like on a good place to do that. And we were separated, and we went to this therapist. And I do remember very vividly her saying, what exactly went down with that? And the affair that he was going to leave me for, that. And he basically kind of repeated the same things that he said back then. And she said, "How long did it last?" And he said, it was over when I ended it that day. Da 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 da. It was over. And she asked, "Did you keep in contact with her?" And he said, "Only through work." Those were the things that he said. And we went to that therapist several times, and then we started to kind of date, I guess is the best way to put it. Um, and we went on a few dates, and we kind of realized that we did really care about each other a lot and actually still loved each other. And we reconciled in probably 6 months. He moved back into the house 6 months later after we started counseling. And things were great. They were wonderful. We had a lot of fun. I felt like we were empty nesters, and we got to know each other on a different level. And he still worked at the same place. And um, I felt like we had kind of accomplished something because I never did stop loving him. I was just angry and tired. And then, COVID hit, and we were forced to be together, and we made it through that. And I think it made us stronger in some ways. But then every once in a while, he would just kind of out of the blue say things like, "I just feel like you're not working as hard to get me back as you did in 2014." And I'd say, "What are you talking about? I'm not like, all I did was be me all along." And then, but things would be much better. I mean, they really were. We were stronger and everything. And then, so on to what's led us to here today and how I found you and all of that is this last spring, I was doing some work for someone, and I had to use some DVDs, blank DVDs, which I didn't have a whole lot of because we don't use those very much anymore. But I knew we had some, and I asked him, "Where did we put the blank DVDs and blank CDs that we had kind of consolidated over the years? I needed to put some stuff onto some DVDs." And he directed me to a drawer that was in his office. And I went and I found what I was looking for. And then I needed some cases that the DVDs went into to send these to the people I was doing the work for. And I opened the first case, and it looked like it had a blank CD in it, but it had a little piece of paper folded over on it. Um, and I thought, what? That's kind of strange. What is this? I don't remember doing anything like this. And I popped it open, and it was a playlist. And it had some very interesting songs on it, very mixed songs on it. And I don't know why, but instinctively I knew because of the times that this initial CD I found was released. I was like, wait a minute, this is from like '04, '05. I could tell because I'm big into music, and it's kind of been in one of my lines of work. And I recognized that some of them were in there that were from that period. And so I put it down, and I thought, okay, maybe I did do this. Maybe I don't remember. And I finished what I was working on and put it away and went to bed. And the next morning I got up, and it was just eating at me because where that one CD was, there was a bunch of others kind of like that. So I went back into the office where I was working on, in my own little office space, and I opened up the second one, and it had a Post-it note on it, like a sticky note. And it was a female's writing, and it said something, it said, "Close your eyes and go listen to number one. Do it now." With exclamation points with little hearts under the exclamation points, like instead of a dot.
Right.
And I popped it into my old CD player, and I was listening to the music, and I realized I knew who it was. It was one of those feelings. All the blood rushed out of my arms. Uh, And I'm looking at the songs, and I realized that two of the songs that were on there, and I even got out my phone and I got out my Spotify, and they weren't released until 2008.
If you'd like to support the show, or you have a question that you'd like me to answer on the podcast, consider buying me a coffee. Just go to buymeacoffee.com/the cheated. And if you want to ask me a question about infidelity, or you need some advice, buy me a coffee, write me your question, and I'll read it on a future episode and do my best to answer it. Thank you to all my listeners and those who support the podcast. You motivate me every day to keep this show going. I couldn't do it without you.
And I don't know how I kept my composure. But then I started going through the other CDs, and there were 22 of them. And they had a lot of notes on them, all kinds of stuff like, sorry you're down, hope this makes you feel better. We can talk about that line. And she'd underlined that line. At lunch, there was, you look great, music and me, brighten my day. Maybe we can try the new, I think she said new, maybe we could try the new Panera, something like that. And that was near their office space. And so anyway, I imported them all and I took pictures of everything. And it was the hardest thing I've ever done, trying to keep my cool. And he was in the other end of the house. And I walked he was sitting somewhere working on something. And I walked into the room and I go, hey, can I ask you a question? Do you have a second for me to ask you a question? And he's like, yeah, sure. And I sat down next to him and I laid one of the Post-it notes right in front of him, set it right in front of him. And I said, whose writing is this? And you would have thought I set a rattlesnake in front of him. He physically jumped up backwards from the table and jumped back, threw his arms in the air, and said something along the lines of, I can't help what other people give me. I know what you're thinking, and it's not exactly how it looks. And I said, what am I thinking? He says, you're thinking that this is all from he was just like stuttering. And I said, no, that's not what I'm thinking. But I am realizing that these songs on here, unless she was able to, I used it, unless she was able to time travel and go into 2008, 2009, she wasn't, she was giving you CDs for a long time, for at least 4 years. And after you had said she hated you. He goes, well, she did hate me. And I said, this is not CDs from someone who hated you. Because the playlists were, just disgustingly sappy, and Leanne Rhymes and Leanne Womack, and How Do I Live Without You by Trisha Yearwood. It was so pathetic. I thought, were you dating a 13-year-old while you were married to me? I even asked him that because these looked like the kind of CDs a girl would make that in 2006 for her boyfriend that broke up with her, and that's how it went.
So what year is that this is happening?
This
When you're
was
presenting him the CDs and the notes?
It was in March of this year, just a couple months ago.
Oh, March of this year. Oh, okay. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. And so just to recap, that relationship that he admitted to and the apartment and all that was in
Mhm.
2004. And now you
Yes.
just recently discovered these CDs and notes and you're piecing it together. You go, wait a minute, these songs weren't even released until 2008. And my
Right.
understanding is this relationship didn't last but a few months, and then you ended it back in 2004. Now I know you're lying because these songs didn't come out until another 4 years later. How did he explain that?
I know what you think you know, or I know what you see, but it's not exactly like that. So he kept repeating that term to me. And I mean, the first 2 days of me finding those were just a complete blur. He finally gave me her full name for the first time I had ever had her full name. I was able to find her LinkedIn. I was able to find her Facebook. I was able to find her old phone number. I was able to find so much stuff that was sitting right in front of me and was in my home. And I knew that some of these CDs that he was playing were songs that I heard him listening to when we were traveling, like when we had CD players in our cars. I remember these CDs, and he would play some of them right in front of me. And then I found his iPod from that period of time, and I resurrected it, and I found the playlists that he'd made with the songs that were directly just from her. And I asked him several questions like, did her husband know? Did her husband know that this had continued? Well, first I asked him, did he know? And he goes, I told you he knew because she told him the same day I told you. I said, did her husband know that this continued? And his response to me was something along the lines of, she was just really, really unhappy. That's what he told me. I said, good for her. That's another way to handle being really unhappy. I'm going to go make sure I let everyone know. Go give your coworker a CD telling them how much you want to have sex with them later. I mean, it's that just blew my mind. Oh, and he just the things that I told him that I knew about her blew his mind because he didn't realize how easily I could find some of the stuff. And
So when you looked up this woman's LinkedIn and her Facebook or her social media profiles, did you get a sense that she's married?
oh yeah, she's married. She's married to the same man she was married to then.
Okay. And so have you tried to contact her?
No. We have several friends in common on uh, several networks um, that I didn't know, had any connection with her at all. Um, the hardest part, and this has been the weirdest part for me, is that a lot of the music that she gave him at that time, it was music that I at one time loved and considered to be sort of like a good memory type thing. I can no longer listen to that music. It's like tainted it. It's ruined it.
Of
It's
course.
played and it's played in the grocery store when I'm shopping. It's playing in it's and it's when I tell you there's a lot of mixed songs you can put on 22 CDs. I'm not exaggerating. I just that's been the hardest part, I think.
So when you brought all this up with him, how is he explaining the time disparity between 2004 and 2008? Does he admit, well, actually, it went on longer than a few months. It's been going on for a few years.
Yeah, he did. He said it ended in I think he said 2008. He didn't admit it right away, but he did admit it. And she did leave the company. I found the last CD was imported into his iTunes in like November of 2008, and that's when she changed jobs. But my question to him was, okay, that's a lot around the time when people started using other forms of like texting became a bigger deal. Maybe people didn't use CDs, but they would send playlists to each other in other ways, like MP3 players and um, did he have another phone maybe I didn't know about? Did there's just so many questions that kind of pop into my head every once in a while, and he tries very hard to not get mad at me for asking because that's how he normally would react. Um, but he knows that there is absolutely no way I would even consider not burning down the house, I guess is the best way to put it. He called it scorched earth. And I know he's afraid of me going scorched earth because they're still in the same kind of work. just with different companies. And
You mean today? He's still doing the
today,
same thing.
yeah, they're still doing the same thing, but just with different companies.
The first time in 2004, did you try to collect other evidence, or did you? I get the impression, correct me if I'm wrong, that you just tried not to look. You didn't want to see anything. You don't want to know anything. You don't want to talk to this woman. You just tried to kind of,
Yes.
metaphorically put your head in the sand and go, I don't want to know. I don't want to see it.
Yep, that's exactly what I did.
And now, how do you feel? Like, are you trying to collect other evidence? Because I get the sense that you don't know what to believe.
No, I really kind of don't. I don't know what to believe because of the time like so much has happened and so many phases, and um I I'm terrified of finding something, but yet I'm still wanting to know everything. And um my therapist and I have had a lot of discussion about it. I feel also because of who I am and who he is and all of that, I'm not really able to talk a lot to other people. So this is actually feeling good to me to just talk to you. Um, I'm not a real public person in sharing my emotions and stuff, anyways. And so it's just made me completely rethink, like, was I living with and I even told him, I said, it's like were living a double life, and he admitted it. He said, yeah, I was. But besides the double life, I also told him that I don't even know who he was, and that makes me look back on my life and wonder who I even was.
Have you had friends and family that you've had to try to lean on during all of this over the years that you confide in? You've mentioned your therapist several times, but are there people in your family or are there close friends that you can talk to about these things?
Not really. I'm so embarrassed. I mean, that's the best way to put it. I'm so embarrassed that I did absolutely nothing about this when I first discovered it. And I guess the one thing I want to say is that if anyone is ever in my position, that to please learn from me that it might be your protective zone to do that and not want to know, but you're not going to cover anything up that's not going to eventually get exposed. And it's like a festering wound. The more it gets covered, the worse it's going to be. And it's going to hurt even more. So please don't do what I did. Don't stick your head in the sand.
Yeah, I was going to ask you I ask everybody what advice would you give to somebody else? I think you kind of answered that. And I do
Hmm.
worry that not only have you been obviously hurt, cheated on, betrayed by your husband, the father of your children, but now you've had to kind of reevaluate a long timeline in your life, not just your entire relationship, was already difficult as it is, but
Hmm.
you've had to re-examine these memories. Well, you mentioned the music. I've heard these songs. I actually liked some of these songs. That's
Hmm.
very upending to your reality. That completely changes the way that you look back on your life and your marriage, the way that you tried to recover after the discovery in 2004. Now the timeline has shifted. Now we've gone from a situation that looked like maybe it was a few months to now a few years. Are you concerned that, I mean, do you believe it ended in 2008? Do you believe him now?
Um, Not really, no, because like I said, I do believe that methods of communication just shifted. Um, And I know I have a really good memory of that period of time and how easily it was to contact people. Like, so that period of time, 2008-ish to 2010, was sort of the time period that my age group discovered Facebook. Like it had been like the high school and college kids prior to that. And um, I just, I cannot believe that that just ended in that way. I That's why I have to accept. I either believe him or I accept it, But either way, everything I look back on in my life since then is not what I believed it was at the time.
That's very difficult.
Mhm.
That's very difficult to deal with. And I feel really bad for you for having to experience that because it's already bad enough being cheated on. It's a whole different game to, like I said, have the rug pulled out from under you, not just with cheating, but learning that the reality that you thought you were living in is not the reality that was going on.
Mhm.
That's very difficult.
Yep.
I don't want to pry too much, but I am curious. What is your therapist telling you about all this? And what kind of guidance are they giving you to navigate through all of this?
Well, fortunately, I had already been set up with this therapist because of something that had happened earlier in the year prior to me finding this. And so I already had this really great relationship with her. And it that has been like a godsend to me in a way. But her main when I first told her this, first of all, I put it in an email to her because I didn't want to waste my time like explaining everything. So I poured it out in an email to her the night before I was gonna have my session. And the first time she basically just let me talk. She's kind of like you're doing, asking me a couple key point questions, kind of like, now let me get this straight. He did this, and let me get this straight. He did that. Um, but then the second time I talked to her, her response to me was, "What is it going to take for you to feel like you know everything?" Um, And she warned me that I may never reach that. I may never understand everything. And you really can't. You never know everything about anyone else, even yourself. But it's more finding the peace inside of you that you can go forward where this isn't the only thing you think about all day long, or it hasn't shadowed everything that you've lived. And I am not there yet. I don't know when I'm going to be there because I do still have a lot of questions, and bottom line is I'm never gonna know the full truth, and I probably know more than I really should and wanna know, but I'm me. I try and figure out as much as I can about something, so I feel like I'm prepared to deal with it.
You're still together with your husband?
Yes.
And what is your goal at this point in your marriage?
Um, I wanna trust him again, and he knows that, and I don't believe he's doing anything with anyone else at all, right now. I do believe this did end at that time.
Why do you believe that?
Um, well, first of all, she moved out of state initially.
Okay.
Um, and there were some other things that I know happened in her life that made it impossible for it to have been going on at that time. It was really kind of traumatic, but um, I think it probably continued after she left there. I believe that there was communications, and so I imagined it was around 2010. And I also could see on her Facebook some of the things that she was posting. She's very stupid in that she puts everything out there on Facebook. But things that were going on in her life, like it was really obvious to me that she probably was focusing more on her own marriage instead of mine at that time.
And you don't actually know for certain that she told her husband. Like you don't have any evidence to support that, right?
No, I don't.
That's an incredible story. Do you okay, so your kids are adults. They've moved out.
Yes.
Was that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And do they know what's going on? Are they familiar with recent developments?
A little, not nowhere near the full. Um, because I was kind of a basket case on Easter, and my daughter could tell, like, what in the world is going on, kind of thing. Um, but she also tries to make everything about her. She's a typical, everybody has. relationships in their family, but she tends to always kind of make things about her. So I'm cautious in what I tell her. Um, it's kind of a need to know thing, and it's also, the more people you talk about in some ways with this, the more you feel like they're expecting you to keep them updated and stuff. And um, so, I've had to be careful in that. I do have a one friend that didn't know me at the time. She's kind of a new friend, and I know she's been through a lot. And I did tell her kind of about what I told you just now, and she, listened. And that's the best thing. Find a friend that will listen to you, not someone that's going to tell you what you should have done or what you could have done or what you should do. Find somebody that is really listening to you um, and cares about you, and you feel safe talking to them, and you don't feel like they're going to go publicize it to the world, and because you don't even know what you're going to do yourself. And so that's another word of wisdom, I think, is keep your circle small when you're going through something like this, and protect your heart, and trust your gut.
Absolutely. What sorts of things is David, your husband, doing to help rebuild confidence and trust in the relationship today? What is he working at it?
Yes, he is. He actually listened to the Yeah, he's listening to the book, Not Just Friends, on Audible, which is kind of a miracle because he doesn't ever listen to books, but he is, and he and I talk about it. Um, and we had one discussion where I was not in the mood to talk about it, and he made the mistake of using some terminology talking about her as being attractive or something, and I was not in the mood to hear any kind of positive words about her going out of his mouth. And he was very patient with me for losing my temper. He has actually been way more patient, and we've actually talked a lot about how he has made some comments to me and said some things over the past couple months that he would have never said before, I don't believe. And he even said to me the other night that he doesn't feel like he deserves me. That I am he doesn't really he hopes that I stay with him, but he understands completely if I decide that I don't want to be with him. And he personally feels like the things that he's done to me in the past, he wouldn't blame me if I didn't, and that he really doesn't deserve me, but he hopes that he can still be mine and I be his.
So it's safe to say you guys are trying to work it out. You are working at it. It's going to be a slow process, and
Yes.
it's going to require a lot of patience and work and time. As I said at the very beginning when we started talking, I'm not a licensed therapist. I'm not here to give you advice or tell you what to do. You're already in therapy, which is great. I tell everybody at least try it. Therapy isn't for everyone, but if you're
Mhm.
getting something out of it, and it's helping you to navigate through this journey in your life, then I think that's a positive thing. So continue doing that. I feel terrible about your situation. Thank you so much for coming on the show. I know you're kind of in the middle of dealing with it. Sometimes I talk to people that, they've kind of already gone through it and they've figured out whether they're going to reconcile or divorce or
Mhm.
whatever they're going to do. But you're right in the middle of it. It seems like in terms of it's been kind of it sounds like maybe it was put to bed for a number of years, but then these CDs and these notes kinda resurfaced, and now it's all sort of being brought to the foreground again.
Yeah.
Um, I hope you'll consider maybe coming back to the show and updating us and telling us what's going on as you're progressing through this situation. What I really hope for you personally is that you find peace and you
Yeah.
find happiness and joy in your life again, and you can recover. This is very difficult. I
Yeah.
tell everybody, hurting is part of healing. So you can't push it away. You shouldn't try to push it away. I think you've already done a lot of that, it sounds like,
Yes.
but
Mhm.
you're going to have to feel it. so that you can figure out how you're going to move forward. And it's just part of healing. It's just part of how we
It,
grow as people.
you are correct. And I hope if anybody ever experiences anything like what I did, and, methods of communication are completely different now than they were then. And it was harder to find out if somebody was doing something behind your back then. But if these precious young women and men that are maybe hearing me and you talk could possibly think like how bad this is going to hurt even years later, to find out A, it went on longer, um, and B, that you never really fully dealt with it. If they can go, oh, wait a minute, I don't want that to happen to me, then it's worth it. And I will come back. I will keep in touch with you, and I listen to your stuff. So I appreciate you.
Thank you so much, Allie, for coming on. I can't wait to talk to you again. Best of luck to you. Best of luck to your family, your children, and even your husband. I hope you guys find the answers you're looking for.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
If you're interested in coming on the program and sharing your story of infidelity, please email us at stories@thecheated.show.